Welcome to another episode of Make Mental Health Matter, which the theme of today for Wednesdays is Warrior Wednesday. I go live on Mondays at 11 a.m. with the theme of Mental Health Mondays, and then Wednesdays now at 7 p.m. As a reminder, if this is your millionth time watching or your first time watching and you haven't done it yet, make sure you mash down the subscribe button if you happen to be watching on YouTube. Or if you're watching from any of the streaming platforms, make sure you add the show into your favorites, your watch list, whatever they happen to call it. Just make sure you add it in there so that you don't miss another episode, because I promise you, every single guest, and I know I say this all the time, but really, truly, every single guest that I have on each day and each week and each month really brings so much value. And the whole purpose of Wednesdays with Warrior Wednesdays is to showcase people's stories, what they've been through, whether it is trauma or something in their childhood or maybe in their adulthood, or maybe they're currently going through, but really bringing those aspects of that story so that you can identify potentially with what's happening with them and really know that there is hope at the end of the tunnel, or however you want to say that. But without further ado, brain is not connecting with the mouth tonight. I am going to bring up my guest for tonight and one of my good friends, which I'm so excited to have him on the show. Matt, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here. It's an honor and a pleasure.
Yay. Well, I am super excited, but I would love for you to just share a little bit about yourself and your story with the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, as Kelly mentioned, my name is Matt Diaz, and I am, um, still looking for the appropriate labels that fully encompass this awesome humanness that we all get to experience. But born and raised in Colorado, and grew up as many people did, kind of in a blue collar household. Father was a teacher, my mother was a nurse, and academics and athletics were a very pivotal part of my upbringing. And of course, all the pressures that come with wanting to win and obviously get good grades and just kind of excel is definitely kind of at my foundation. And so uh, as I continue to grow and proceed, I learned that many of those teachings turned into blessings, and some of them even kind of turned into almost handcuffs in a way as I've continued to grow down life's journey, life's path. Continued into higher education, got my degree, only to realize that the degree I was pursuing was not actually the career that I wanted to pursue as a career. At that time, as a 20-year-old individual still kind of finding his way, I recognized that as I got close to graduation, I kind of started getting a glimpse of the professional world, that path, that career path, at least to my understanding at that time, really seemed to shed light of a more isolated profession. And at that time in my life, the isolation was kind of building up with inside of me. In fact, at that point in my life, I actually felt like I was dying on the inside because I had suppressed much of my emotions growing up, and whether it was anger, frustration, sadness, etc. Kind of grew up with the mindset that men don't show emotions, or emotions were kind of a sign of weakness. It was never really verbalized, but that was just kind of the stigma that I was exposed to. And so much of that at that time kind of came to the forefront. So as I got near graduation, I recognized that the path that I was on was not necessarily the path that I want to continue down. And so then I decided to pivot and go into business for myself, which was an extreme step outside of my comfort zone, especially when it comes to making new contacts, new individuals, and basically starting new conversations. So that was really the beginning of my personal development journey. And from there, as I embarked through my professional experience and business experience, I was met with rejection and fear of failure, much of the aspects that kind of are innate with business. But at that age, I wasn't necessarily emotionally equipped to handle it. I don't believe so, especially with some other setbacks that had happened along the way. But it was really all the failures that I'd had, all the rejections up to that point, all the pain that was growing within inside of me, that really fueled my desire to pursue personal development and self-growth. Because in my mind, personal development was the key to my freedom. That whatever the emotions or whatever the pain that I was harboring, that there was a way out of kind of that suffering, if you will. And so that hope is what kind of continued pushing me through all the difficult times that also ensued. And so that being said, fast forward another 20 years, my personal development journey and self-exploration has now allowed me to work with a nonprofit helping college students and young professionals develop leadership skills, as well as becoming certified as a neurolinguistic practitioner, master practitioner, as well as becoming an emotional wellness coach. Basically, in short, I've been blessed with all the mentors that I've met along the way who have been examples that challenges can be overcome, and people can actually move from a state of survival and suffering into a space of thriving. And so that was definitely an inspiration for me to pursue my own growth. And here I am today, excited to share the lessons that I've learned and the experiences that I've had with as many people as possible, and be able to help anybody I can. So a bit of a mouthful, but I think that encompasses a good amount of who I am.
No, that's good. I mean, there were so many good layers to what you just talked about, and specifically around really starting off in that athletic space and the competition, and then moving into, I mean, the space where emotions weren't something that you talked about, right? Like men's mental health, or guys in general sometimes shove down their emotions because that's not the right thing to do. So I think that's a really important conversation. And then also acknowledging where you were, especially with the degree that you were going to get, and acknowledging that that was an isolating space to be in. And I know that there's been lots of things throughout time that have really led you into the place that you are, but being able to encompass all of those things in what you do now, I think is just really incredible.
Yeah, thank you. It's definitely been a wild ride, and it's only getting better.
That's amazing. And I know, I mean, I have known you for years. I know when we first met, probably five years or so more ago. There has been so much growth in you, and I see it all the time. And I know that because you were in engineering for a while, and then now you're really embracing like this wellness aspect, and training for a marathon, which I know is something else that you're doing, and I think that's amazing too.
Yeah, and actually, just kind of a clarification, that my current training regimen is for a 100-mile ultra marathon. So I've run about 20. I've run 23 marathons, all pre-COVID, and then when COVID and lockdown hit, ran a virtual ultra marathon, and now actually training for my first in-person, hopefully 24-hour ultra marathon. So this particular one gives us 30 hours to finish it, but my goal is to do it under 24. So that athletic drive is definitely still alive and well within me. And I think where I'm at now, it's kind of more of in a productive space. Kind of, you mentioned competition, where I don't necessarily see myself in competition with others per se, but just more in kind of a competition, if you will, with who I used to be and who I was yesterday and who I am this morning, and just kind of this continuous progression and evolution of this human experience. So yeah, And anything I could do to continue to stress myself, stretch myself, stress myself, as well as just gain new experiences. And so, and it's actually been quite therapeutic because even though it sounds daunting on the surface, on first hand, the training aspect requires a lot of time outside. Multiple hours at any given time, just being in nature. So it's kind of interesting that very isolation that I was not attracted to early on as a professional career is something that I'm definitely drawn to when it comes to nature and that physical activity as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, how do you do an ultra marathon virtually?
So, great question. First of all, you go online and you give a website your money, and they send you a T-shirt, and they say, best of luck. But in short, it's probably arguable that technically did not count as an ultra marathon because it wasn't all in one span. That particular race, they gave us 4 months, May 1st to August 31st, to complete basically the equivalent of running across the state of Tennessee. Wow. And so when I got wind of it, it was like, okay, I did the math. That's about averaging 5 miles every single day for those 4 months. I was like, I can do that. That was a stretch to be able to do that every single day. I was like, all right, let's do this. So, a couple days go by. I'm like, all right, I'm rocking. And then I think it was like by day 10, the first person had completed that, I think, 1,200 mile journey. Already put up 1,200 miles in like 10 days. And so I was like, the race was kind of over, because it was the first of its kind. But then they're like, all right, well, we're going to add a new goal is turn around and come back. And then, you get a different type of prize. And so that I think the first person did in 24 days, something like that. So I say all that to say I was about week 6, kind of a month and a half into it. I started doing the math and I was like, okay, well, if I really start pushing myself, because there was additional checkpoints, right? Because across the state of Tennessee was, I think, 12, maybe 800 miles was the checkpoint, whatever it was, because it was in kilometers as well too. But if I went across the state of Tennessee and just a little bit further, then I would hit like 1,000 miles. But if I went a little bit further, then it was 2,000 kilometers, something like that. So it was like that carrot was just like continuously dangling in front of me. But it was about week 6 into it, I recognized like, okay, I actually have a legitimate opportunity to make it across the state of Tennessee and turn around and come all the way back. So that year I ended up putting, I forget what the total number was, 2,000 kilometers total, whatever that turns out to, maybe 1,200 miles in the course of those 4 months. But when I made the decision, that actually averaged out to 15 miles every single day for 6 weeks. Maybe it was 6 weeks on the back end. That's where the 6 weeks come in. And that was a stretch that I'd never done before. So I was putting up 100 miles per week. And it was definitely a test to my endurance, to my dedication, to my focus. Meanwhile, the entire world is shut down. This is summer of 2020 and everything is, uncertainty is at all-time high. And in a way, that was probably the best thing I could have done for my mental health because it allowed me to focus on what I can control. And with the magnitude and the size of the threat, if you will, the challenges that the entire world faced, in essence, I also needed to, I guess, unconsciously have a challenge of my own of the same magnitude that would keep me focused and moving forward. And like I said, 15 miles every single day for 6 weeks, 100 miles a week was something I'd never done, completely outside of my comfort zone. And I did it, and I think I had a couple of days to spare, and it was definitely one of the most transformative states that I've ever put myself through. That's so now, so that was 4 months. And so now it's like, all right, well, let's go do the real thing. And this particular race gives us 30 hours to complete 100 miles all at once. And again, my goal, like I said, is to do it within 24.
That's amazing. I mean, just the mental, emotional, physical state that you have to get into just to even do a marathon, not necessarily an ultra marathon, is really, and you have done so many even pre-COVID. How did that, what the question that popped up into my head is, as a child being in competition and really growing up in that environment, how has that translated into, or has it translated into the marathons?
Yeah. So I would say what I've learned about myself and my own personal experience is that when I set a goal, oftentimes I'm doing it from, my conscious mind, right? It's like, oh, that sounds nice. It's nice and shiny. I want that. I'm going to go get it. And especially if it's a goal that I'm serious about and requires me to stretch and grow, oftentimes somewhere in that process, when the transformation truly takes place, then there's a realization that, oh, that was not what I was actually driven to go accomplish or become. So what I mean is, I think it was around 2010, I set a goal that I wanted to run the Boston Marathon, largely because at that point in time, I was at a low mental state. Like I said, I went into business, and at that point in time, I just was not having the success that I had expected of myself. And therefore, it just started to chip away at my own self-confidence. The things that I said I was doing, I just was not doing. So therefore, I wasn't necessarily advancing towards my goal. And so I was at a point in my life where I really needed to kind of not crawl out of the mud, but just explode out of the mud. I needed a transformation. And so in 2010, I was like, okay, I want to, I grew up as an athlete, so let me just start there. And I picked a goal that required me to stretch myself, and that was to qualify for the Boston Marathon, which a marathon is 26.2 miles in length. The Boston Marathon is the oldest running marathon in the world and arguably the most prestigious, one of the toughest to get into. You must qualify to get into that race. And the way you qualify it is by running another marathon in a particular time based on your age group. So for my particular age group at that time, for me to get into, to even be eligible to apply, doesn't, just because I qualified doesn't mean I'm automatically in, it just means I'm eligible to apply. And the time and the pace that I needed to run to be eligible to apply was 3 hours and 5 minutes. And so the 3 hour mark is kind of this significant marker in marathon running. If you could run under three hours, that's pretty stellar. And so I was like, all right, well, if I'm going to run 3:05, I might as well shoot for 3 hours. So I was like, all right, that's my goal. I want to run a marathon in less than 3 hours, qualify for the Boston Marathon. And that was in 2010. Oddly enough, about a week or a month later, my wife and I, we got into a serious auto accident. That was like, the car, kind of a sports car, was just kind of crumbled up like a tin can. And somehow we both just walked away from it with scratches, which is pretty incredible. And what I realized coming out of that moment is, I was at a place in my life where there was things that I was asking for, but I was just not open to receiving them. And so in a way, that was the universe just nudging me, saying, hey, you've been requesting what you want in life, and you've not been open to receive it, or you've not been willing to grow and accept it. So here's a little nudge and a reminder. So coming out of that, then I was kind of like really ignited to say, okay, I'm going to go do this. And that was in 2010. And for about 4 years, I did nothing when it came to it. And I say nothing, relatively speaking. Like I would start running, I'd get injured, I'd get running, but my mental commitment level wasn't necessarily there. So at the end of 2014, I actually ran my first marathon, and it was 3 hours and 48 minutes. So that was pretty stellar. Oh, and I forgot to mention, so to run a 3 hour marathon, that means you have to run each of those 26.2 miles at a pace of 6 minutes and 51 seconds per mile, which is just flying, right? It's sprinting. And so after I ran my first marathon, it was 3 hours and 48 minutes, which is still flying, and somewhere around, I forget what that pace comes out to. But I was like, okay, now I know what I didn't know, and I'm gonna go do it again. So I signed up for 4 more marathons the following year, and I did not train for any one of them. So I basically showed up to 4 marathons without training, kind of like, oh, I'm gonna will myself. I'm just gonna mentally do it because I want it bad enough. And like at mile 6, I can barely walk because my body's like broken down. I still got like 20 more miles to go. So the lesson I learned there is respect the marathon, respect your goals, and 2, you're either going to pay the price beforehand in preparation, or you're going to pay the price day of. So when 2015 came around, I was doing my annual list of goals, and so there I wrote it again, is qualify for the Boston Marathon. And this was a pivotal moment for me, because at that moment I was like, I wrote down the same goal, qualify for Boston Marathon, but the luster was gone. Because when I looked back, especially over the last 4 marathons, I was like, but are you going to qualify? Because you've been saying this for now 10 years or 5 years, and you gave one serious go at it, but the last 4 attempts, you didn't do anything. Do you really want this? Because at this point, it's either time to cross it off your list because you're not doing anything about it seriously, and it's only eating away at my soul even more and my confidence, because I was saying I was going to do it and I wasn't doing it. Or you can actually do what's necessary to qualify. And so when I looked at my master list of goals, I circled that one, and I circled 2 other goals that were very similar and had been lingering, and basically wiped everything off the slate. So all that being said, 6 months later of 100% commitment to my training, which means going, during the summer, to be finished by an 8 a.m. because it gets hot, right? So to be finished with a 3-hour run by 8 a.m., that means I'm starting at 5 a.m., which means if I want to be committed to get that in, that means I'm waking up at 4:30, out the door at 5. And if I want to be rested and recovered, I'm going to bed at 9:30, right? So there were these layers of, okay, here's what needs to be done. It was easy to do and easy not to do. And I did it. And it was about a week before that race where I realized, and circling back to your question, what I realized is that it wasn't necessarily the goal of qualifying for Boston that I was really after. Because at that point, I was like, looking back, I did it. I'm at this speed right now. I know it's almost a shoo-in. I'm a week away from the big race, and I qualified, but it was a week before I realized that what I was really pursuing was, in the beginning, I knew that this goal was possible for others because they're out there doing. I just didn't believe that it was possible for me. Therefore, I wasn't even doing what was necessary over those previous 5 years. And that was a lesson to me that, I am worthy of the lifestyle I want. I am worthy of the goals that I want to have in my life. I am worthy of doing whatever is in alignment to obtain that. So, and in addition, the reason why marathon running to begin with was to spend time with my father. So growing up as an athlete, my father's always been a marathon runner himself. So as an early age, as a young kid, I was definitely running often with him. Kind of stepped away from it when I got into more competitive sports in middle school and high school. And then after college, it was nothing. So when I got back into it, it was largely a big driver to spend time with my father. So not only was it looking for my own self-worth, but it was also an opportunity to spend time with my father. That's what growing up as a child athlete has driven me to my marathon training.
That's amazing. And I mean, there's so much goodness in what you just said. We do have to go to a quick commercial break, and then we will come back. But what I would love to do is just pick up what you were talking about, because there are a lot of things that even like resonate with me. So we will be right back after this sponsored message. If you're just joining us, I am talking with my good friend Matt Diaz, and we have really been talking about how when he was younger, he really grew up as an athlete, got um, into a degree that didn't necessarily fully align with his life, and it showed a lot of isolation. And then moving forward into really doing marathons and having this new explosion into what you now do really with wellness and a nonprofit that you work for and so many other things. And that was a brief synopsis, but um what I love that you are talking about really is, and I know I didn't formulate the question the best, but I love how you received it. Um, is that we have these pivotal moments in life, right? That we honestly, it is make it or break it, or it's hey, I know what I want to accomplish, but I'm just not really truly doing the things that I need to make that happen. And it's there are ways that the universe, God, source, whatever you call it, gives you signs that, like your accident, that you literally walked away with small scratches and potentially could have died, with how I saw a picture of that accident. And I was like, holy moly, right? Like the car was just scrunched up and you both walked away, which was absolutely a miracle. But glad that that is what happened. And then for you to be able to take that as a sign of, okay, I've been doing these things, but like, have I really been doing them to get what my ultimate goal is? I also love that you talked about scratching away all those goals. And that's something I actually did the other day. I looked at my board and I was like, man, there's a lot of things on here that like although I still want to accomplish them, like I have so many that I'm not ever going to truly accomplish them because I'm so fractured. And a lot of the things that you were talking about really is like that receiving. Like I've been really learning how to receive and how to align fully with what I am trying to accomplish in life. And it seems like the appearance to most out there that I really have my shit together, but in a lot of ways I don't feel that myself, right? Like I hear what you are saying is that do I really truly want what I am trying to go after, and am I taking the necessary actions to fully make that happen? And for me it also pops up because I'm doing the Climb for Mind in August, which is the 29029 Everesting challenge. And I've just barely started like really surface training. And we have 36 hours to climb 30 miles up a mountain. And just the other day was the first time I did like one pass, which was like 2.53 miles. And I was like just barely jogging, but doing like the incline. And I'm like, man, am I really training? What am I doing? And so I also, when you were talking about going to the marathons and not doing the training and just showing up and be like, I'm going to will my way through it. Like in a way, that's how I feel with this climb. But I know similar too is that something needs to happen. Like there's this explosion that needs to happen for everything to really align. And I know that that's why I put myself into this position that I am doing this climb, because it's emotionally, physically, mentally challenging and nothing that I've ever put myself through. So I hear you as you're going into the ultra marathon, and you have been doing so much more with training and getting yourself ready than I have by any means, but I'm taking this as a sign to do the necessary steps to actually make that happen and not die on a mountain, right?
That's
So,
right.
but I think a lot of the other really amazing pieces that you were talking about is mentally, right? Like we go into these certain situations and it's something maybe in our past that is creating these patterns or these beliefs of unworthiness, and we really really want something, but we don't necessarily fully believe that it can and is possible for us. And I think that was something really powerful that you said, because I know a lot of the audience really maybe not, potentially, right? They struggle with those type of things like unworthiness or um having those really low points. And as we all start really shifting, I still think there's a shift happening from COVID to now, and really understanding how isolation in general has affected us. So I would love to hear, I mean, more about your story, but also what are those tools and things that you really use now for your mental health, your emotional health, and all the things that you do currently?
Yeah, great question. And interestingly enough, I was actually just thinking about that here today. As I reflect back on my journey, as I mentioned, that it was really this emotional uh, pain that had driven me to learn, to pick up books and to read personal development books, self-help books, philosophy books, psychology books, really to find my own inner peace and my own happiness. And it's been an amazing journey. And not only was it just reading, but it was taking action. It was finding ways to get outside of my comfort zone. It was going to seminars, taking classes. Basically, I was looking under every single rock kind of for the answer. So in a way, I was kind of like looking for my salvation externally, where at some point in time, I can't even tell you when it clicked. I just remember looking at my bookshelf and looking at all these books. I'm like, huh, you know what? They all say the exact same thing. Which kind of yes, but also no. But what I was really saying is, is kind of getting a glimpse of my life and my life experience. And it's not that they were all saying the same thing, but for once, I was actually hearing kind of a unified perspective within myself, and that the answers that I was really seeking were inside myself. And so that was definitely a pivotal moment for me. And then in 2018, that's when I began studying neurolinguistic programming. And that has been, in my opinion, kind of the capstone of my personal development journey, as far as how the brain and body are connected specifically, and the neuroscience associated with that. And that has given me a lot of tools that I still, to this moment and to this day, utilize on a day-to-day basis. Whether it is finding myself kind of getting caught out of breath, kind of doing anxiety, kind of like finding myself in a state of fear for no reason whatsoever, just wherever my thoughts may be going. I could be mowing the grass, and next thing I know, I'm breathing out of my chest and my stomach. So that's kind of that self-awareness. And so that's just an opportunity for me to pause and just breathe, right? State management is one of my favorite tools. State management can be referred to as the 3 A's. There's that awareness of whatever my current state is. So, like in that example, a state of fear or a state of anxiety, well, there's really nothing to be fearful of. The second is acknowledging and accepting that state. It's like, okay, this is a pattern. One of the things I've learned is that people are not their behaviors, and this is just a pattern, just a behavior. And our behaviors can be shifted. And so if I can just pause and accept that and begin to ask myself, well, what would I rather be in this moment? Well, I'd rather pause and slow down and breathe through my stomach. And then the third A, so that's awareness, acceptance, and the third A is action. Actually doing whatever's necessary to get in that desired state. So, for example, pausing and breathing. I can think it, but it's something when I actually do it. So I'm constantly on a day-to-day basis utilizing that. And then, of course, even some um, diffusing of triggers is something that I'm currently playing with in my life. currently just moved to 6 acres of land with a reservoir kind of in the backyard. And right now, this time of year, everything is coming alive. And right now, there are snakes galore in the vicinity. And so you want to talk about kind of that fight or flight, or even just fright, the freeze. That's what the space that I've been in as I've encountered snakes. I've actually been using some NLP processes to diffuse that response and actually activate more of a Steve Irwin response, the crocodile hunter, just that more of a curiosity and amazement and being one with nature and not necessarily fearful, but learning to see how I can solve whatever problem needs to be solved or relocate them without necessarily being in a resourceful state. So yeah, the tools that I picked up along the way, I never really know which tool I'm going to use next until a situation presents itself and I find myself like, hey, something's going on. Let me just pause and reflect and see what I have in my tool bag. And many times it's reaching out to others for additional perspectives. Because sometimes it's like being in a jar and there's a label on the jar and I just can't read the label because I'm on the inside of the jar. So sometimes reaching out to a mentor, to a fellow coach can definitely be helpful to be able to share with me some of my blind spots and things that I may not be able to see as well.
I like that reference, the jar. I mean, it is, we get in our little bubbles, right? And we can't see from other perspectives. And so we need other people around us to be able to see that too. And I'd like to know how the directions work also.
Exactly. Yeah.
Can you
The
tell me
ingredient.
the directions? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Shake vigorously for 60 seconds.
Right, yes. But I think, I mean, all of those are really good tools too, and I know we've talked a lot actually on the show about NLP, or neuro linguistic programming, and I'm sure if you've watched this a few times, you're seeing a theme, because it is just such a powerful resource to have. And we use a lot of different types of modalities. We've had a lot of guests on here that use that, but one of the ones that does come up often is breathing. And I know personally, I've had multiple guests on here who have actually done breathing exercises with the audience, which I have learned myself how those can be useful. And I know you talked about like breathing from up here versus down in your gut or your lowers. And that can be, well, I guess the other day I was actually watching something about that and how much difference it can make, like where you're breathing from. And I mean, I learn new things all the time from my guests. I learn them from the internet or things that I'm watching. And I think that breathing techniques are pretty important. But I also like how you talked about state management, and how if we acknowledge where our thoughts are going, which could be really great for some of the audience members, is where are your thoughts going? Are they going more towards negative? Are they going more towards positive? Are you kind of like that in between? But being able to acknowledge them and then take action of what state you actually want to be in versus just thinking about it. So I think that's great that you brought those up too. So tell me a little bit more about what you do now with, it can be the nonprofit if you want to showcase a little bit about that, or if you want to talk about being a wellness coach.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned before, the journey I've been on, even though in the beginning it seemed to be fueled by that pain, that drive, it definitely has put me on a path that has allowed me to meet some incredible individuals, pioneers of the personal development industry, just some really genuine um, individuals that really exemplify what's possible for a happy, fulfilled, love-filled lifestyle. Not just in one area of life like work or health and fitness, et cetera, but in the entire uh, uh, in each area of life. And so again, that is always inspirational to me, and to this day, I still have these memories as well as examples that, hey, regardless of the path that I've been on, of course, I'm not quote unquote there by any means, and there's still much to learn. So there's still more of life to experience. And so, all that being said, I feel like I'm at a place in my life now where I've learned some incredible tools, and obviously a couple of things that we just mentioned are a couple of those examples. And I, I just absolutely enjoy being able to share those lessons and tools with others. And so the nonprofit I work with is called the Society of Asian Scientists and Engineers. So as you mentioned earlier, my degree of choice, or the degree I pursued, was that of electrical engineering. And so, of course, as an engineer, there's plenty of stigmas and stereotypes just about an engineer. Kind of introverted. There's one of my favorite jokes is, um, you know, how do you know? Let's see. I'm drawing a blank now. How do you know that you've when you're meeting an introverted engineer? It's like, how? Well, because when you introduce yourself, they're looking at their own shoes. It's like, okay, well, how do you know when you're meeting an extroverted engineer? How? Well, because when you meet them, they're actually looking at your shoes. So that was definitely how I felt where I was at in life. And so, this nonprofit is definitely aimed at developing the leadership skills, the communication skills, the the personal human connection skills that align with leadership and leadership development to go along with the highly technical skills as well too.
Yes. That's awesome. And I know that you have done some speaking in the past with the nonprofit too, right?
Yeah, it's been a great opportunity to travel around the country and be able to attend regional conferences at various different college campuses across the U.S. The opportunity to meet some incredibly young individuals and either host a workshop, host a keynote, etc. And it's definitely another opportunity to be able to impact some lives. You just never know when your story, your presence can impact somebody else. Or like Marianne Williams says, when you're liberated from your own fears, your presence automatically liberates others. And so I've also heard it said that a candle flame loses nothing by lighting another candle.
I love that. Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, a space that not many people get into are in nonprofits. But it is definitely a rewarding space, and to be able to share that light with the rest of the world, and really having your background in engineering and understanding how you're the words that come into my head is like you're more open, like you're more open to this wholeness and this wellness and different aspects potentially than what engineers in general have currently in their toolbox. So I bet you give a lot of value when you are in these conferences.
It's a lot of fun, and I think I probably get just get received just as much, if not more, from the individuals as well too.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about your coaching, and I can say firsthand, Matt has been my coach in the past, so I of course am biased, but I think what you do also in the coaching space is incredible. So tell me a little, or tell the audience a little bit about that.
Yeah. Uh, so kind of as I alluded to earlier, coaching wasn't necessarily something that, I saw myself as a kid saying, oh, I can't wait to grow up and be an emotional wellness coach or leadership development coach or personal development coach, right? Um, in fact, even the title of coach was something that I was kind of hesitant to putting on early on, because in my mind early on, it was like, okay, well, to be a coach, that means that I must be qualified to be able to tell somebody or help somebody achieve their goals. And in my personal opinion, one of the best ways to do that is if I've accomplished it myself. So obviously, if you were to run a marathon, the amount of knowledge and experience I could provide would be that much more valuable because I've actually done it, versus, if I were to advise you how to run a marathon and I'd never done it. So in my mind, it was kind of that same concept, or that same mindset that said, well, how are you going to be a coach and help somebody achieve something you've never done? Of course not, so I'm not going to do that. But then along my journey, what I realized is that, even that mindset was making it about me, my perception of how I show up in that relationship, when in reality, it's more about the individual, right? It's not that I have the answers for anybody. It's that we all have our own individual answers within inside of us. And so therefore, as a coach, it's really about, asking questions and being curious and understanding a person's model of the world. What are their beliefs? What are their values? What are the programs running in the back of their mind that actually allow us to show up in our day-to-day experiences? Because again, at the end of the day, our unconscious mind is running 95 to 99% of all of the functions within our body, where consciously it's really a fraction of how we present ourselves to the world. And so again, it wasn't necessarily about me, but it's about how can I help somebody achieve what they want by really helping them unlock the answers that are already within them. So once I realized that, that's kind of what allowed me to really step into this coaching space. And it wasn't even, something that I sprinted after per se, or ran after. It was something that once the world began to lock down and jobs were cut off and industries were shut down and people were sent home, let alone the mass panic and fear of what's going to happen next. How does this impact my life? I can't leave my house. I can't leave my city. I can't get home. All of these were very real challenges that we all experience. And so at that moment in time, I was a person who had some resources. I was a person who had some tools. And so it was actually a referral that started me on my coaching business that says, hey, my brother-in-law, is struggling right now. He lost his job and this is now impacting the family. Don't know what to do. And he's looking for some guidance. And so I was able to have some great conversations with him and ask some questions and really help him basically just refocus on what was important to him and what was within his control. And he was able to ultimately navigate his particular challenges, which included relocating out of New York City to Vancouver, where his wife's family was, and then ultimately to the UK, where he was originally from. So that was kind of the happy ending. But in the beginning, it was like, how in the world am I getting home when everything is shut down? Just kind of that fight or flight aspect of them. And so since then, I've been, again, honored and privileged to be able to work with so many individuals, and even had the opportunity to create some couples coaching programs as well too. So definitely the thing I've learned is I don't necessarily need to be experienced in the goal that somebody wants, but I am experienced in what it takes to look within and begin to kind of look under our own surface responses, our own surface thoughts, to really see what is our genuine drivers that may be either holding us back and or that will allow us to propel forward. So that's kind of the snapshot of how I've approached coaching over the last few years.
That's amazing. I mean, and I know through all the things that you and I have done together, and both of us kind of having that mindset shift of it's not about me, it's about the other people. And really, like, we're just guides. We're guiding them through the process of what they need the most. And it doesn't have to be anything that we fully understand. It can be what it is, right? They understand where they're going, and we are really truly just those guides. And I know, as I've said many a times, I'm very grateful for being on the receiving side of your coaching. And so I want you to just tell where, if people want to follow you or find you, where is the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, thanks for asking. The best place to find me is going to be on Instagram with the handle of Ideas Can Change the World. Diaz is in my last name, so the letter I, Diaz. Ideas can change the world. Because again, our own ideas can change the world. Pun intended.
Right, pun intended. And I know that I did drop it in the comments, so you can follow Matt at Instagram, best place. But I so appreciate you being my guest. Is there any last words that you want to share?
I would just share that one of my favorite quotes, I guess, or maybe not necessarily, I have a lot of favorite quotes, but one that definitely inspires me to keep going despite life's challenges or obstacles comes from Winston Churchill. You know, if you're going through hell, keep going. You know, don't just stay there. Don't get comfortable. Don't hang out. Keep going and get through it.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, Matt, again, for being my guest today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right, y'all. That was another amazing episode of Make Mental Health Matter. Again, I go live on Mondays at 11 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time and Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time. Mondays, I have guests who are professionals in the mental health space or advocates of mental health. And Wednesdays, we really showcase the stories of the warriors and what they've been through throughout their life to really give that piece of hope to you so that you can identify or move through and know that there is hope at the end of the tunnel or whatever you may be experiencing. Either way, make sure that you add this into your watch list, your wish list, your subscribe list, whatever that happens to be, so that you don't miss another episode. And join me back next Monday for another incredible episode with another amazing guest. I thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you back next week.
Hey everyone, this is Araya McGarry. I'm the host of Get Celebritized with Araya McGarry, right here Wednesday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the Limelight Network, right here on E360 TV.